So we've just witnessed the Formula 1 2022 Belgian Grand Prix. Just a quick race review, really. We'll run through a few laps and see how it went out. What a fantastic race for Red Bull in the end. Max Verstappen, absolutely unstoppable. And Perez, not as good in the Red Bull, in my view. So it all started on lap 1. Great start from Carlos Sainz, who's off the line really well. Perez had a really poor start, to be honest. I was looking forward to the fight down the Camel Straight and into turn 5 between Perez and Sainz. I thought Perez would have the lead and off he'd go, and it'll be a matter of Verstappen trying to catch Perez towards the end for the race win, because the Red Bulls have just been unstoppable all weekend. Didn't really play out that way, and Perez's poor race, in my view anyway. I mean, he finished P2 in the end, but from my point of view, he should have been miles in the lead, considering how fast that car is and has been, especially in the hands of Verstappen. And you can't be getting outclassed by your teammate that badly every weekend. And he had a really poor start from P2. Alonso got him straight off the line. Lewis Hamilton then made his way around the outside. George Russell nearly squeezed him on the inside also. And then we had down the Kemmel Straight, instead of the battle between Sainz and Perez, we had what I was really looking forward to: Alonso and Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton behind Alonso coming down the Kemmel Straight, had a run on him with the drag. Tried to make a pass round the outside and then didn't really see Alonso on the inside there. Tagged him. He did later apologise to the team, and Fernando hold his hand up, knew it was his mistake there, and that let Perez through back into second place. Then around on lap 2, Nicholas Latifi lost it on the turn 5 exit. Lost it, spun it around, and then touched Bottas, who ended up in the barrier. Lewis Hamilton also stopped out on track, then couldn't continue. Thankfully, I mean, somehow Alonso did after that accident, because Lewis was high in the air and landed quite badly down on the ground following that crash. And then we had the safety car come out. That was out for a couple of laps. Shame for it. I mean, it really played out really well for Verstappen and Charles Leclerc. I mean, Verstappen from the start was already up into about P9 or P10, and he was absolutely on fire straight from the start, really. Safety car had come out. Leclerc was doing really well right up behind him, but then he got a tear-off visor into his brake duct, and he had to pit under the safety car. He then came out last pretty much after that, and then it was just a Ferrari strategy show just all over the place. I mean, we heard it all over the radio from lap 19. I mean, I don't know what they were doing there. Conversation about what they should do, what they shouldn't do. But anyway, back to the safety car. Safety car went in, then we had quite a battle with George Russell and Perez. He had a good exit on the start, because Sainz trying to lead the cars round to start once the safety car was going in. Locked up and then just had to brake a bit more. A bit cheeky really from him there, because you're not really meant to start slow, but just because I think it was a chicane, he got away with it. That held Perez a little bit, and then Russell got the run on Perez. Good exit from him. Perez locked up into T1, and then Russell had the slipstream down up through Eau Rouge. Excellent run through there, down slipstream down. Tried to pass him on the outside. He wasn't going to make it on the Red Bull. They just got excellent straight line speed. Couldn't make it work there, but that was that at the start there. And I mean, with Leclerc pitting so early, I think they knew from there with damage limitation, Max was well gone. He was just absolutely knife through butter at that stage. I mean, lap 8, Verstappen was already on the podium. He was about 4 or 5 seconds behind the leader at that time, Carlos Sainz, who was pretty steady, to be honest. Kept Perez behind him. He was pretty comfortable for about 3 or 4 second gap with Perez behind him, even on about lap 8 or 9. And at that stage, Verstappen, like I said, he was already on the podium, 4 seconds behind. Is absolutely mega down the straight. He made a pass on Alonso, and it looked like Alonso was in a boat. Just couldn't nothing, absolutely space rocket down the outside of him. And it was just from there you could see it was just a matter of time for a Max win there. I mean, by lap 12, we'd seen Max Verstappen. He'd passed Sergio Perez. Sainz pitted in for the pits, trying to get the undercut. It worked really, actually, for Carlos Sainz. Probably the best strategy move from Ferrari we've seen in quite a long time. Sainz pitted the next lap, or on that same lap. Verstappen, he was only a couple of seconds behind Perez, made the pass on him. Max Verstappen started on the softs, as did Carlos Sainz. Perez was on the medium, so probably why he got the poor start, really, but so was everyone else around them. Especially Alonso and Lewis, George Russell also. So Max passed Perez. He was absolutely mega flying. Carlos Sainz pitted. Max pitted about 4 or 5 laps later. Carlos Sainz got the undercut, came out ahead of him. He was only about 2 or 3 seconds ahead at that time. But to see from Max going from P14, where he started, to being in the lead by lap 8 or 12, and about 3 or 4 of them laps being under the safety car. So, I mean, within 4 laps, 8 laps, he's kind of gone from P14 to the lead. His car just looked like he was on something else today. And that was it, really. Pretty steady race from there. Nothing really too exciting to go or talk about. We've seen a move from Russell on Charles Leclerc. Charles Leclerc seemed to get quite up the grid from from last in the end after he pitted. Had a steady race trying to get back up into the end. And then what happened in the end? There was the move of the race, actually. Let's talk about that. Lap 36, Ocon on Sebastian Vettel. If you'd seen Mick Hakkinen and Michael Schumacher at the same corner at Spa, where we had Ricciardo Zonta in the middle, slow in the white Ford, I think it was at the time. Schumacher went for the inside, Hakkinen around the outside, cut across. I mean, absolute mega move, and we've seen pretty much the same again. This time we had Pierre Gasly, who I thought did a brilliant job, who started in the pits, to be honest. He was up in about 7th place around that time. But on medium tyres, it running out to the end of their life. Ocon and Vettel had on the newer tyres. By that stage, they all pitted for their second stops. And Vettel went for the inside, Ocon went for the outside, Pierre Gasly in the middle, both with DRS, so it's slightly different, but I mean, Ocon made it around the outside, overtaking 2 cars on one corner. He had a double he could take earlier on in the race as well, but I kind of missed that one. To be honest, I've probably too busy with something else, but absolutely mega move. Reminded me of that Schumacher move straight away, and Hakkinen move, to be honest, on Schumacher, and that was absolutely brilliant. And that was it, really. We did see at the end George Russell closing in on Carlos Sainz, who was in 3rd place, and that was interesting there, really. I did think George Russell might have that podium, and I mean, that would have been an absolute sucker punch for George Russell to come and take the podium off the Ferraris. I know the Ferraris have been slow this weekend, but I don't think they'd expected to be behind the Mercedes, especially considering what Toto said. I mean, that was their worst qualifying in a decade yesterday, and they were absolutely mega of miles off the pace. But George, I mean, absolutely Mr. Consistency, fantastic race. And it looked like he might get, I mean, he was 2 seconds off at the end. He passed Charles Leclerc, and then we had the absolute joke strategy call again from Ferrari. They tried to get the fastest lap. They pitted Charles Leclerc from 5th place. Alonso came out, as Charles Leclerc came out the pits, on the soft tyres to try and get that fastest lap. Alonso got the slipstream down Eau Rouge, passed him down the Camel Straight, and then Leclerc was in P6 with a lap to go. But Charles Leclerc did manage to do that, get the pass back, and even with the slipstream down the Kemmel Straight, getting the pass on Alonso, he still didn't manage the fastest lap of the race. That still went to Max Verstappen, who was, let's go to them, and I'll go through the teams now and how they all performed and given rating. Red Bull, absolutely on a league on their own. Everyone thought with this new directive coming in of them having to sort of stiffen the chassis and raise it, that it might affect their pace. I mean, the only team that really seemed to affected was Ferrari. Looking at this weekend, they were absolutely nowhere. Mercedes again nowhere, but Red Bull were just in a league of their own, especially Max Verstappen. He was in, well, I mean, apart from the engine penalty, he started in P14. He was in P1 by lap 12, as I say, with the safety cars. He was just mega. I mean, it must have been absolutely demoralising for Perez, who in the same machinery was absolutely nowhere near. I mean, Max has started 14 places behind him. Perez couldn't even get past the Ferrari of Sainz for a lot of the race. Sainz did quite a brilliant job there, considering the pace that Red Bull have to keep Perez behind him. It was only up till a lap 21 or 26 where Perez finally managed to make, it was lap 21 where Perez finally managed to pass Sainz, which, I mean, should have happened a long time ago, especially with their pace down the straight. Max has actually hit Perez for 6 in this race. Perez was just poor, especially considering he couldn't get past Sainz early on, especially in that Red Bull. Ferrari were absolutely struggling. Let's go on to them. Ferrari just were not fast enough today, and I think, like I say, that directive to stiffen the chassis and try and cut the porpoises has affected them most. They were just absolutely nowhere in the race. Charles obviously took the engine penalty in the hope that they'd try and get up, but I don't think they'd finish. They'd finish P6 in the end. So finishing on from the Alonso and the fastest lap scenario, they pitted Charles Leclerc at the end on lap 43 or 42 to try and get the fastest lap. Alonso came out ahead of him, so he had to repass him, didn't get the fastest lap, and then in that meanwhile he got done for speeding in the pit lane, got a 5-second penalty and ended up finishing P6, just trying to get an extra point but lost points. Just disaster. I mean, even throughout the Ferrari strategy team, I don't know what they're doing throughout. About lap 19, 20, they were having a massive conversation of what tyre they should go on and where they should be, and just sort of giving up, saying that we're our position is P5 in this race to Charles Leclerc. We're not getting up any further. There was no let's try and push or motivate the driver to go further. I mean, it was a struggle, and Ferrari were just nowhere on any of the tyres. I mean, even at one point they sort of said that the hards are about 0.2 faster, and especially with the high deg. Charles Leclerc pitted and still went out on the mediums. I didn't understand that from my point of view. Maybe they had other ideas there. But Sainz did a brilliant race, to be honest with you. He was P2, P1 leading, kept Perez behind for a lot of the race, and without really any pressure from Perez, to be honest. It was fairly quite easy for him. Pitted early, then got the undercut on Max Verstappen, came out ahead of him. Just didn't have the pace of Max. I don't think anyone did. Anyone in the world would have today. He was on another level. And then finally, I think their high deg paid to his chances of P2. And then they were under pressure really from George Russell, and he's really done really well to keep George behind, because came out even after his second stop. He was about 7 seconds ahead of George, both on hards, and George managed to close that down, managed to get into about 2 seconds. George was a bit surprising really, didn't really have the pace there at the end to just get the job done. Going to Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton had the accident with Alonso at turn 1. That was the end of his race. He put his hands up, admitted that it was his mistake. He said Alonso was in his blind spot, so didn't see him there as he went to take the corner. Alonso was on the inside. Clipped his front wheel, up he went in the air, and that was damage was done there for him. George Russell has been absolutely mega, Mr. Consistency throughout this whole weekend. Just also always get, you know, there or thereabouts, keeping it in lost my track now. That's my son there trying to get his hands in the way. George Russell, like I say, yeah, he was absolutely mega. Was fourth place, kept Charles Leclerc behind him, kept Alonso at bay for most of the race, and nearly got Carlos Sainz for a podium. And I mean, that would have been absolutely mega, considering they were saying how poor they were from the qualifying yesterday. So decent there in the end. Alpine, mega from Alonso. He got the 5th position in the end, getting past Charles Leclerc. He's always on it. He's Mr. Consistency, been brilliant. And Ocon did a pretty brilliant race as well, to be honest. He was P7 in the end. Obviously, he started at the back. He took the engine penalty also. Aston Martin, Stroll had a bit of a sloppy race to the end, to be honest. He was in the points at one point, ended up P11. Vettel was absolute star today. 8th place, some points for Aston Martin. He was brilliant at the start, and I mean, I think he was up to P7, 6 or 7 at one point, and an excellent start. McLaren have an absolute shocker this weekend. Obviously, with this, disappointed that Danny Ric is now leaving the team. Lando Norris had the penalty with the engine, but just couldn't make it anywhere near. Norris beat Danny Ricciardo in the end, even with that. So Norris was 12th and Danny Ric finished in 15th. Another poor weekend considering where he started. Alfa Romeo, Bottas was out. He got tagged by Nicholas Latifi, and that was the end of his race. And Zhou Guanyu finished in 14th, a decent race for him. Haas were just nowhere this weekend, and that's a bit disappointing for me because they've normally been the ones that have actually outdone it. But it's just not happened. Mick Schumacher was at the back. He came out with quite a brilliant move around the outside of someone, I can't remember now. On Eau Rouge was a brilliant move from him. But he finished P17 in the end, and Magnussen P16. The Alpha Tauris, I've got to give it to Pierre Gasly. Pit lane start, and he's got 9th place. Fantastic result for him. Yuki Tsunoda also started in the pit lane. A decent result coming out in P13. They've had some shockers in the last few weeks before the summer break in their races. So this is quite a good result for them, getting back in the points. Williams, got a shout out to Alex Albon. He was absolutely mega all weekend. He was up into Q1 yesterday. Started quite well in the race. And then he got a point for the Williams team, who've absolutely been nowhere for most of the season. Latifi had a sloppy race. Obviously, he had the spin early on, which he knocked Bottas, and he was out. And that was that in the end. And while it was a race just all about Red Bull and Max Verstappen, who was absolutely on fire, just unstoppable. And then next week we're out in Holland. It'll be his home race, and I don't think there'll be anyone that'll be beating him there. So we'll see you next weekend. Thank you very much for watching The Most Boring Man on YouTube.